Hi, I'm delighted to welcome Dominic Snell from Wealth Dynamix to Fin Spotlight today. Dominic, great to see you and thank you for joining us today. To kick us off, could you give the audience a quick introduction to Wealth Dynamix and your role within the organization?
Sure, Matt. Nice to be here with you. So my role at Wealth Dynamix is Product Strategy Director. I've been with the firm since we were a very small gang of guys in Covent Garden back in sort of late 2013. So I've had a number of roles with the firm. I was previously running the consulting team on the delivery side as well. So, got the scars of working out with, in industry, not just Wealth Dynamix, but before that as well. Wealth Dynamix as a company initially attracted me because they were trying to do something that at the time I think was pretty unique. We're a company who were really initially trying to make CRM work for wealth management firms. That was in our DNA. A lot of the people who joined in those early days were people who had been out there in various industries, including wealth management and other financial services, trying to put the client back at the forefront of the technology that was being used. Many of the systems that we saw being used were very account centric, very sort of portfolio driven, so to speak. They weren't doing a lot in terms of really helping to drive the relationship. So that was what our founders initially saw as the opportunity in the space. And so that's what, where the WDX1 product originated. We are now, however, we describe ourselves as a CLM vendor. So CRM took a back step in terms of our kind of marketing positioning, probably in around 2016, 2017, because CLM actually was emerging. This concept of an end-to-end life cycle was something that was beginning to get a bit of traction and it seemed to resonate. I'll touch on that a little bit more as we go forward, but primarily what that's about, what we're about as a company, is helping to digitize and to orchestrate the end-to-end execution across that client lifecycle. So all the journeys that are involved, whether that's the client participating, internal staff, related teams that support a relationship manager, everyone involved. There's a huge number of moving parts, and really WDX1 and our products, including our new product, which is called Clemmy, which is a SaaS offering, are all about trying to orchestrate, define, and execute those journeys across that life cycle.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. And you talked to where you've come from as a company. Do you guys target a particular segment of the market?
Yeah, we do, and that's really why we have more than one product now. So originally, our clients with WDX1 were the likes of Charles Stanley, Ruffer, Coulter Cheviot. So the kind of, I guess, broadly tier 2 discretionary fund management, wealth management firms. We're talking hundreds of users, long-term kind of strategic projects to tackle either onboarding or issues around client reviews where they needed to kind of implement more stringent controls and be able to demonstrate that, of course, from a regulatory perspective, but also then extending to other parts of that life cycle, as I said. So projects with firms like that are, as I said, are often multi-year, they're ongoing, they build and build. But we did see a huge demand from other type firms that perhaps wanted to do something with less in-house execution, less IT staff, less people to work on the change side. They wanted a product that would have the same benefit, the similar features, but that was fundamentally faster and easier to implement. And most importantly, that baked in a lot of the thought leadership and best practice that a firm like Wealth Dynamix has acquired over the last, approaching 10 years or so. And that's really where Clemmy was born. The idea was, let's take all of that, try and distill it down so you've got the best of CRM, the best of this idea of CLM, all those industry specific parts into a single box, essentially, that smaller firms couldn't only afford, but also kind of leverage, as I said, a lot of that lesson. And us as a partner, one of the biggest things we offer, aside from the software, is the experience. You know, all of our clients value the hand holding, the adoption lessons, the ideas of how to make this stuff actually get rolled out and stick, because anyone can switch on a system, right? And that might take a year or two, but actually, how do you get people to use it? How do you get that to actually deliver the value that they set out on?
I mean, CRMs as a piece of software or an area isn't new. What are sort of the main challenges you guys have specifically thought, that's a gap, we should tackle that? You know, what are the main challenges you're helping to solve for clients and CLM as well?
Yeah, I think fundamentally at its heart, and it goes back to that point around adoption. You know, enterprise, traditionally, certainly enterprise CRM systems can be complicated beasts. You know, if you take, without kind of, you know, going into naming specific platforms, we saw many banks before our time with Wealth Dynamix, and indeed in other industries, where they would take something off the shelf, you know, an enterprise CRM, they try and roll it out. It had to be either heavily customized or bespoke to death, to the point where, you know, in-house IT teams had a group of people who essentially became the only people who understood how that worked. Now, of course, over time, what happens is that those people start to go on into the next step in their career, maybe in another firm, maybe they set up their own thing, and then that product kind of reaches end of life. The worst thing about that situation is that where you can't make those changes, or where there isn't a clear roadmap, users get frustrated. They don't see where this thing is going. You know, they spent millions on initial implementation. So there's an issue with the longevity of those types of projects, these in-house builds. The other issue is user experience. A lot of the products have moved on since you know, the last decade. But fundamentally, what the difference is with our products is that we're designing them around the users we know exist in these firms. You know, we're thinking about the relationship manager's role, how they interact with their assistants, how they hand things off to you know, another part of the business, whether that's operations or the workflow with compliance or whoever. We, from product perspective, design the system around personas that have those roles. And that's gained from our experience on the ground. We also conduct interviews and speak to people actually who do the job. So fundamentally, we are focused around wealth management. That's all we do. You know, when it's not just one of our vertical solutions. It's in our name. It's in our DNA.
I mean, clearly the focus on wealth management is a clear kind of differentiator. You know, it appears to me as well, the sort of disciplines of CRM and you know, the workflow that maybe sits in operations and other functions is quite often separate. So the fact you guys have combined that seems pretty unique as well. Is that sort of, would you say that's kind of one of the one or two of the main differentiators you've got in the market, and how you differentiate from your competitors, or are there other elements as well?
I think, yeah, from a product perspective, you know, we started out, as I said, from having that CRM at its core. So what does that mean? You know, we think about CRM, we should be thinking about data model, right? Fundamentally, the data model that sits under the system needs to represent the world that we're operating in, the business that we're running. And out the box CRM does not do that. So a tremendous amount of work, design, a huge amount of kind of intellectual work went into that data model. And I have to say, that was a lot of the decisions we made around that were made from seeing it go wrong in other places where that had been done wrong. And you can't count the cost of not getting that right. You know, some of the huge, you know, multi-billion-pound companies that are in the space, the vendors, the core banking systems, that is fundamentally one of the biggest things that they have, right? It's that data model. So we have that at our core. On top of that, then when you think about the sort of CRM type features, as you go across that life cycle, you know, early stage marketing, the relationship modeling, you know, the single view of a client, they are CRM features, right? It's not CLM that bought you know, the idea of a single view or a 360 dashboard. That was always there as a part of CRM. Right? The difference is that, again, when you think about our products, and hopefully when people have seen it, they'll see how striking the idea of a an actual single view over a wealth relationship can be, and how it needs to be visualized. The idea that one person can be connected to many relationships, play different roles, the idea that the security model around those different roles and what part of the data should be visible for different bankers or different people supporting that, that's not something that comes out the box with a CRM, right? Because it fundamentally relies on the rules, and it goes right back to the policies and procedures that exist in that organization. So an implementation of one of our products means going right back to that level of where you've interpreted those policies, those procedures, and be able to turn that into something with configuration, not hard coded, not something that you have to sort of come back and change, you know, with code, with developers. There is a huge amount of stuff that we still need to do, right? I'm not saying that it's all curve, because that would be, frankly, you know, very, very difficult to achieve. But that's part of the product as well, the layer that sits beneath it. So that's the CRM part. And the other side of that coin is the CLM part. And for me, what that is about is again, it's touching on the rules engine and the triggers around when things need to be done, the processes. But it's also about where you start to bring the client into that journey as well. I guess we'll touch on that at another point. But yeah, that's fundamentally the way I think about it, and the way I describe it is that it's the combination of those two things that makes us unique, because many firms have come from a sort of process engine background, you know, so some of our competition will say actually come at it from a different way. They started off with the processes and the sort of client facing piece, and then they tack on to try and do some of those other sort of core CRM type things. And that's not necessarily wrong, it's just a different origin of their product. I think that what's unique about us is that we, as I say, we started off from saying, let's get enterprise CRM right sized for wealth and working, and then we'll do the other piece as well.
Encompassed, almost bring those other back office processes and other processes kind of into the sort of one system. Is that a fair representation? So not just the early stage marketing and but all through that journey and all the processes associated with it as well.
Yeah, I think service management, as it's called generically in the CRM world, you know, how do you service active clients, ongoing, you know, requests that are coming in from multiple channels? How do you resolve those cases, those issues, and how do you kick off things at the right time? That's still part of CRM. I think that the whole kind of marketing and sales piece, and sales is not a word we've ever really used, right? You'll see it on a, you know, a Salesforce pitch. We don't talk about sales, we talk about business development, we talk about intermediary management, external asset management if you're in, you know, Switzerland or another European country. And that's a part of how we've taken that idea of how do we distribute, you know, these messages, these marketing campaigns, but doing it either to end clients or to intermediaries who then introduce you clients. And those workflows, those concepts are fundamentally baked in. That's how we've taken something like a standard kind of email marketing idea and said, well, how do you actually put that into practice in the world we're in? And how do you track all of those introductions, for example, and then most importantly, turn those into something like an onboarding case, where you're then starting to build up a much more complex view of the client and all of the steps that you need to do within that. And it's all very, very closely connected. And that's what makes us unique. We're not handing that data over to another system for that to sort of be done elsewhere. It's all in one consistent workflow.
I think it's always interesting to hear, you know, some customers have come from, you know, maybe really their own version or doing it quite manually or considered other systems. But what do you think would make, you know, when customers chosen your product and live with it for a bit, what do you think they would say makes you stand out?
Well, I think first of all, it goes back to the partnership point. Undoubtedly, there are always going to be sort of talented individuals, you know, who exist inside firms who can make a self-build happen. But the risk there is that is not going to be an organization. That's not going to be a growing team with people, you know, managing that knowledge and nurturing that knowledge. That's what we do, right? For our people coming in, you know, our best lead consultants have come through the ranks. They started off on projects. They've then gone to the point where they're leading a project. They're now engaging with clients and helping them, you know, deliver and plan out their own roadmaps. So we are fundamentally nurturing that partnership. So that's a unique thing. But when it comes to product, I would say increasingly, and we're putting a huge amount of investment into the area of the configuration element of the product. So as I said, nothing is hard coded. Any feature that comes down, the first thing we're thinking is what is the best practice for this? What are the elements of allowing that to be configurable for our various types of client, various markets we now operate in. So our whole product management process is around that. And then what is the tool that we would need to put in there to allow our consultants, and in the future, hopefully end clients, to actually configure that. So we're not at the point where we're ready to say, someone can pick up our product and have someone internally configure the whole thing end to end. But as I said, we've made huge steps this year in our form configurators, in our process configurators, and all of our other rules that drive things like document checklists, and some of the other kind of AML scoring type configuration. So there's probably sort of 5 or 6 categories of sort of config tools that we have now built up, and we've spent the last year with a dedicated team building that up. And that's in response to our partners, our delivery partners, and our end clients saying, we want to take a little bit more ownership now. So we've got the product in, but in year 2, year 3, and moving forward, we do see a demand for certainly a larger firm to say, we get this stuff now, we know the product, can we get our hands more on it? And that's around that total cost of ownership piece. They want to be able to be more agile, do things themselves, especially in a fast changing environment. So we're responding to that, and we're doing that by investing in that area of the product.
I mean, I 100% agree that more, the more configuration you can put into a tool, the more you can kind of give control over to the teams. The stronger the product's going to be as because it's always going to evolve. Things are always going to change. You just touched on total cost of ownership there. I wonder what some of the challenges you see for clients actually in evaluating your solution, because you do cover a couple of the functions, right? So you're talking to not only the let's say front office or sales or wealth managers, you're talking to that kind of area of the organization, but also it's touching into compliance processes and other processes. What are some of the challenges in actually evaluating a tool like yours versus others which might be more targeted at one function?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it absolutely is a challenge. If I look back at any of the clients we've ever won, where we had sort of long periods of engagement, call that a sales process or sort of pre-sales effort, to go in and talk and to engage and consult. Quite often the RFP process or RFI comes in and it's asking for something. It might be called a CRM project, or it might be called something like an onboarding project. When Wealth Dynamix get the opportunity to go through and explain what it is we do and how the product connects these somewhat disparate ideas, quite often the end RFP ends up changing. It ends up being a case of, we thought we needed that, and that, but actually what we've seen here today is something that can help solve more of the problems. So it's a challenge for us. It's also an opportunity, because obviously it's quite a unique thing. I would say that the root cause of that is that firms, and it's not wealth management, but I think large organizations tend to approach IT projects in silos. Businesses are built up around silos, and you mentioned kind of operations, front office, middle office if they exist. And unfortunately, management and budgets and things are also allocated in that way. And so traditionally what happens is that one of those problems, or one part of the life cycle, to use that expression, is dedicated some funding, and they say it's a priority for this year that we go out and we do something around onboarding, for example. Now, the challenge with that is that the edges of onboarding, but the bit that happens before and the bit that happens afterwards, are fundamentally connected, right? They're connected from the client's perspective because they don't care about the internal process. They care about their experience. So what's an interesting thing now is that we're starting to see a lot more kind of head of CLM type roles or journey managers. Those roles didn't exist. They didn't exist 3 or 4 years ago, especially 9. Now they do. And what those people are doing effectively, where we've seen them, is starting to look across those silos and actually have an element of budgetary control, and also then obviously the technologies are being deployed to actually cover specific journeys across those, and that's to our advantage, right? Because that's exactly how we would describe our solution as well.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's definitely a challenge, and I think interesting that organize, it actually might require more like holistic organizational change for people to recognize that the way they should be looking at this problem is actually a fundamentally slightly different way to the way that they've traditionally have, which is in those silos. I guess, yeah, that's an interesting challenge for anybody who's crossing those functions.
Yeah, and the business case, it might be different as well, right? The business case for different parts of that journey might be driven by. So I'll give an example. So, quite often business cases will be driven by efficiency. Increasing efficiency, reducing cost. The idea that the project should pay for itself, and actually the business case needs to be proven out around how much more productivity can we get. It might even come down to looking at headcount, although it's very rarely that crude these days. It's not about kind of saving FTE. Maybe in the background someone's talking about that, but I would say generally people are much more focused on getting the most out of the people they value, right, rather than saying let's try and skim off members of staff or whatever. But so on the other hand, so you might have something, let's look at increasing revenue. Let's look at actually driving more business, more new money through the door. And both of those things, they're not incompatible, right? A good business case is made up of elements of both of those, as I said, at different ends of the life cycle. So the whole business development piece, the marketing piece might be about the latter, might be about the revenue piece. You get into onboarding and you get into client management and servicing, and it might go slightly more towards how do we make things more efficient. So I think it's really, really important to understand what these metrics are, what the KPIs are that are driving a solid business case, because if you can't make that case, you've got no chance of doing something beyond a very small siloed project, because you'll only get that much budget. So again, this is a challenge for us as a firm, and it's we really enjoy it, and we help people with this process, is going in, putting together the bones of that business case and really working to help them understand that their investment in this technology makes sense.
Where do you think for most organizations, what's the biggest driver that you guys see on a maybe let's call it like an average basis, where is it mostly been driven from the sort of client relationship, let's put it that way, side of things, or is it sort of maybe more like the business process management, so like more like the service management as you described it there, or is it something else even?
It still does vary, but I think increasingly now, especially given the events of the past sort of 18 months or so, again and again, the priority seems to be around the client service element, the client experience, and how to make sure that you're competitive, if not differentiated, on that front. Before, I think that there was, dare I say, a little bit of complacency when it came to actually needing to differentiate in that respect. I think everybody would like to say that was always at their core. In wealth management and private banking, and fundamentally these high touch type environments where client relationships are paramount, it's almost something that has been done by default anyway, right? Because the whole idea that a client is paying for a service is predicated on the fact that there is a valuable relationship there. Otherwise, they wouldn't be paying for that. So I think many firms would have said, well, of course that's something that we care about, and it was. But the question was, how does technology really help, and what is the demand from clients that technology is there as a part of that relationship? I think that's the bit that's changed. So now we're seeing a lot more firms prioritize, and they'll say things like client portal. Although I think the idea of the solution that they have in mind is a sort of traditional portal, almost like a web portal. What they're actually saying is, how do we bring the client in and make them much more a part of the process, as an actor in that process, so they can feed into it whenever they want, actually, and it should be on there. It should be up to them as to how little they participate.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely I think a massive theme that we've seen in the last, let's just say, since the start of COVID, really, is that push towards client portals, and as you said, like, people have different views of what they're imagining there. We touched on the total cost of ownership as well, and how you've been helping to help build those business cases as well. What do you think? There is a challenge there in terms of building out that case, especially when you touch on multiple functions. What's the kind of how do you build that in the most effective way, convincing way, to really sell it to the organization, I guess?
Yeah, well, I think this is something that we've probably matured in a hell of a lot since we began. I mean, we used to put a lot of work into doing those business cases hand in hand, with our potential clients, but a lot of it was qualitative, so you would go through, and we used to conduct, and we still do, in fact, we call it a study. We go in, it's a really important part of the process, where we go in and we have sessions with all of the business areas. We understand their pain points, we listen to them, we produce a very, very detailed playback on priority areas, and really help kind of get that plan into some shape. And that includes a roadmap and a release plan, everything else. But it used to be mostly qualitative, right, with some anecdotal numbers thrown in. But we took the step probably sort of 3 years ago now to invest in a bit of software, which we buy from a third party, and we've configured it around wealth management. So what it does, it captures the KPIs and metrics based on the business drivers that you're interested in. So essentially, you select the drivers that you're looking for. That then bubbles down. It's a whole hierarchy. It goes down from metrics and kind of lower level things that you need to go out and gather. So we give that to our client. They go out, they collect those numbers, and it could take a number of weeks in some cases. That gets plugged in, and there's a whole framework then where you can put in what you think the potential gains could be as a part of deploying these solutions. And we're very, very conservative with that. You can plug in, say, 2% gain or 3% reduction in time, or whatever it is. And then you say how many, for example, how many cases are there a year, or how many onboarding cases do you run every month? That then produces very, very detailed forensic level kind of business case, return on investment charts, payback periods and everything else. That has been a huge benefit to the whole process, because it shines a light then on what really are the areas that the project should be focused on. And that might not be the same as what people intuitively thought originally. So that as a sort of consulting element of our business, and it's something we do for free, by the way. When we get to a certain stage of a process, we'll often say, if we don't go any further, if we take the project on, then the clients don't even pay for that. And they take that, they take that off us, they brand it themselves, they present that to their executive board. And quite often the project managers, the change managers involved, we're arming them with that material. And it's very, very good. And it's informed a lot of the way we look at product as well. So it's kind of this feedback loop has come back into our product management and our roadmap.
What's typically, I mean, you said you've been doing that a couple of years now, and put you on the spot here, see if you know the numbers, but in terms of what's the average ROI, or sort of about what kind of average ROI can people expect to get then, and obviously they're going in with these numbers presumably to ask for good chunks of money. What kind of ROI are they typically looking at?
Yeah, that is difficult, actually. There's so many, and if people will see from our website, there's so many different kind of solution areas now that we present in terms of WDX1 and Clemmy, our other product. it really does vary. I'm trying to think of the last kind of sort of larger one that we did. The only figure I can really sort of pick out, because it's been a while since I was in that team, to be honest, Matt, my role as product strategy now is taking me away. But I do recall a figure for a pretty large project that was end-to-end CLM, that the sort of payback period, or the initial kind of payback for the investment in the project was no more than, I think it was 15 to 18 months. And that was purely off the back of the biggest number I recall from that business case specifically was around client reviews. So this particular firm needed to go out and effectively do a large scale remediation exercise and client reviews across all of their clients. They were taking what was a very, very manual process, a set of rules, a set of policies, and they had some tools, so it wasn't like, purely paper based, but it was fragmented, it wasn't joined up. And the way that they collected that data meant it couldn't really be reused later on. There was kind of electronic documents going out at some point that wasn't joined up. So it was sort of patchwork of things that had built up over time that were failing to deliver the benefit that I think cumulatively they should have. And what we were presenting was a very, very coherent solution, but also then you could double up and use it for onboarding, reviews, and any other type of reviews. And then fundamentally you were collecting the data in a way that then unlocked your CRM, your early stage prospecting, your client management. So it was this idea that once you've done one of those pieces, the next stepping stone builds on what you've done. It's not a case of saying there's loosely connected, loosely integrated tools that are good in their own right, but once you piece them together, we use this term of orchestration, and I kind of think of it as, when we think about orchestration, the music sounds good, right? If you do it with lots of different tools and they're not very well connected and the data's not looked after, there's an orchestra there, but they're out of tune, right? And actually sooner or later, someone's going to hear that music and go, yeah, we don't like that. That's not a good experience for the client and for the audience internally, i.e. the users. So how's that for analogy?
Probably a good one to finish on as well. So Dominic, thank you very much for all of that. Really interesting. And thank you for joining me today.
Absolute pleasure, Matt. Thank you.